You're listening to the NABS Now podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Hey everyone, you're listening to the NABS Now podcast. I'm your host Nina, and today we're going to be talking about cooking. I know that for some of us, cooking may be a stress reliever or something that we enjoy, but I know for me personally, it took a little bit of work to get there. It can be a little daunting to work with things like grills and stoves and knives and other kind of implements that we use in the kitchen, maybe as a blind person. And I attended training at the Louisiana Center for the Blind, where I really blossomed in the kitchen. I really learned how to love cooking and some other things that I hadn't tried before, despite growing up in a very inclusive kind of household in terms of kitchen prep and other things. So this episode, we are going to have a little bit of a cooking tutorial, and then we're actually going to talk to another student about her experience during home management in blindness skills training and how that was transformative for her. So let's jump right into it.
Welcome, NABS members and fellow podcast listeners. My name is Robert Parsons, and I am a board member of the National Association of Blind Students. I am also the current chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I am so excited to be joining you all and working on this podcast episode, and excited because it's one of my favorite topics to talk about: food. So, if many of you aren't aware, I'm already nicknamed the Chickenologist by NABS members worldwide, and it's for a good reason. Usually, a lot of times, if you're looking for me and I'm not at work or in my books, I'm usually in the kitchen, practicing or perfecting one of these recipes or something that I can come up with and then later name a recipe after I've hijacked it, probably from Pinterest or something. But my favorite dish to cook and my favorite dish to eat is always chicken, and it's because it's required to be that way when you come from the background I have. So let's talk about that, shall we? To give you some basic information about me, I identify as a Black Caribbean American cisgendered male, which means that a lot of my cooking and my experiences pull from my cultural past and the fact that my family has ties in Haiti as well as in Belize. However, this dish, not only being Caribbean in nature, also reflects one of my fondest memories of my time with the Federation. And it is during the summer of 2018 when I was the home management instructor at Blind Inc. for the college program. Shout out to Blind Inc. and all of the training centers as well, because you guys are doing amazing work and we love you. But I prepared this dish for the first time at a large scale, meaning like I've only made this at home for my brothers and sisters or for my parents or something, but never something as wide scaled as an entire training center. So to do that and to be able to feel that accomplished was really freeing and also supportive of the fact that people actually like to try different foods, because this was something that was new to people's palate. But now that that's out the way, let us talk about the ingredients. So this dish is being prepared on a stovetop, so I would want to suggest that if you are at home and you do have a stovetop, whether it's electric or gas, that you practice as much safety precautions with using your stovetop and make sure you're using it effectively in order to get the dish done. Now, when it comes to using an electric skillet or an electric frying pan, those are also options, and they also provide, I think, a little bit more safety as well. So you're welcome to use those too. You would just have to convert that time from what you were doing on the stove to doing that with the same commands on your electric skillet or fryer. So we'll start off with the chicken. For this recipe, I'll be using boneless chicken breast, boneless and skinless. However, you are welcome to use legs or thighs as well. I enjoy a good chicken leg or a good chicken thigh too. You also want to include 1 beefsteak tomato and 1 white onion and 2 cloves of garlic. That will round out all of the necessary produce and meat for the dish. You also want to then include 1 can. They only come in small cans, so you want a small can of tomato paste. You will not use the entire can, but just get the smallest one possible because it doesn't require that much tomato paste. After tomato paste, you also want to include your seasonings, which is a third of a tablespoon of black pepper, as well as what we call Assan inside of Haiti, but a lot of people call Sazon. It is a seasoning that can be found in the international food aisle. I know it is made by Goya, but it comes in a box, and within the box has small envelope packets that are pre-measured. That is the seasoning you would want for this type of chicken. All right, let's talk about cooking. So to prepare your chicken, the first thing we want to do is clean it. I always tell people that when cleaning poultry, specifically chicken and turkey, that there's no such thing as being too clean. You want to make sure that your chicken and your turkey is clean of feathers, excess fats, etc. With boneless, skinless breasts, a lot of that work is already done for you because there isn't any skin to pull off and there aren't any bones to get in the way of being able to dislodge any pockets or pieces of fat that are stuck to that breast. Now, when you take your chicken out of the packet, if you have pieces of fat on there, you can tell from your fingertips and being able to kind of pinch a little bit the difference in the texture of chicken meat versus chicken fat. Chicken fat is a lot more cloudier, a lot more puffed up, and a lot less dense, while chicken meat is heavier, thicker, and isn't as easy to tear off. Generally, a person that is running water over a piece of chicken while fat is still on it should be able to detect where the fat ends and the chicken actually begins. From that, truth is that if you're using a knife is better for you safety-wise, by all means, I promote that. But some people are just as well off being able to remove the fat using their hands and pulling the fat off of the chicken breast. All right, so we want to run some room temperature water, preferably a little cooler and a little less warm because you don't want to start cooking your chicken, as well as a cup of white vinegar, and that will help you clean your chicken. So you want to clean that really well, and that includes not just pouring it over the chicken, but also rubbing and kind of being able to massage the chicken, because that also lodges up any pockets of dirt, fat, etc. that's there. While that's going in a bowl and you're doing that, you then would be able to just pour the water out and rinse the chicken off. Once you've done that, patting it dry will finish cleaning your chicken. So now that you have your chicken clean, the next thing I tell people is to cut the chicken into what I like to call fork-ready pieces. So meaning that you don't really have to cut them into strips, because I think that makes the chicken cook really, really fast. But you're going to order 2 pounds of chicken breast. It's going to come in probably 2 very large pieces. So you want to cut those down to be at least, I would say, dinner plate proportionate. Something that you probably could put 1 or 2 pieces on your plate and that still have room for other things to be on there, versus putting a whole breast on there and then having to cut it later on once it's cooked. With a larger piece of chicken comes a longer preparation time if it's going to be on top of the stove. So cutting it down also increases the chances of everything getting thoroughly cooked. Once you cut these chicken pieces down, you should be able to then begin seasoning them in the same bowl that they were resting in. After you've patted the chicken breast dry and you've cut them, I would take the black pepper, sprinkle it over the chicken, followed by taking 1 of the Sazon or Essence packets out of the box and using just 1 of those packets on that amount of chicken. And what you want to do then is what we call tumbling, where you take the food and you massage it into the meat. And in doing that, not only are you massaging it on its surface value, but you're also flipping the chicken around. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It can just be kind of tumbling it with your hand the same way a washing machine would spin. But whatever way that you think is best for you, you want to make sure that that chicken, that powdery substance, that seasoning is completely incorporated throughout the entirety of the meat in your bowl. And you'll know that from being able to just touch it, and you'll feel, okay, it used to be completely smooth, now it's not. However, you'll also tell from the smell, because the combination of the two seasonings really, really lights up the room. It makes it smell like there's something that's good is about to happen, and just stay tuned. So now that you've done that and you've seasoned your chicken, you can leave that resting in a bowl for the moment, and you want to get your frying pan. If you're using an electric skillet or frying pan, you want to set this up and plug it in, but leave it on the off position. If you're using a stove, you want to make sure that your frying pan is centered on your eye. So do not turn your stove on before you put the frying pan on there. You want a cold stove to line your frying pan up. Once you've centered your frying pan on your eye of the stove, you want to set that to medium after you've used 2 tablespoons of oil inside of the pan. So I personally use olive oil, but you're welcome to use something that burns at a lower temperature. So corn oil wouldn't be a good suggestion, but olive or peanut or sesame oil would be preferred. 2 tablespoons of that, and I would let that go for about 5 minutes. Generally, when I test if oil has come to temperature, I like to use a drop of water in the pan, and that's because using anything else starts to cook it if it's hot, and water has a higher evaporation point, so it can dissolve faster. But dropping a drop of water is a good way of being able to check your pot without touching it, to make sure that you don't burn yourself. And if you do hear noise once you drop the drop of water in there and it sounds like it's kicking up and it's what we call the angry pot noise, a lot of sizzling, crackling, etc., it's time to add your chicken. So you want to space your chicken pieces out within the pan. Make sure that your pieces in the pan are separated in a way that they're not on top of each other, so that way there's air for them to sear and cook. But at the same time, you don't want it to be so far apart that it eventually just doesn't cook. So assuring that is just kind of using maybe a wooden spoon to create some space between your pieces of chicken once you lie them down. At that point, you should be making a lot of noise on the stove. Your pan should be sizzling and your chicken should begin starting to sear. You will not be frying chicken. This is just going to be pan searing it and getting it ready to go for its eventual stew. But right now, what this does is it also toughens your chicken's meat up to get it ready to start infusing in the deliciousness that it's about to get added to. But it also allows for the pan to receive some of the seasoning that's on your chicken, because that same seasoning is going to help to make your roux, your sauce, as well as make your vegetables taste 10 times better. Cool. So that chicken should have been frying for about 6 minutes. At 6 minutes, we are going to flip each of those pieces over. When you flip them over one by one, and I like to use a technique where I'll use my wooden spoon and a fork and kind of use them as sandwich pieces and put one on one side and one on the other and be able to turn it over. But they have 2-sided spatulas and other tools. Whatever tool that you think is best for you to flip things with would be the one I would tell you to go with, because you want to use the most familiar technique to you. Now, once you flip your chicken, you should be able to tell the difference in the sides, because the first side that was cooking should have a lot more of a tenser and firmer texture than the side that went over. And once that happens, you'll know that you're on your way. So that side of the chicken now fries for another 6 minutes. And once those 6 minutes are done, and your timer goes off the second time, that would have been that your chicken has been searing for a total of 12 minutes. At this point, we will be able to pull our chicken out. It is not done yet. It's not done, trust me. But we are going to pull it out for right now. So you're going to pull that out. And what I like to do is, while the chicken is in the pan, you can grab a plate and just line it with paper towel. And then that way, when you pull the chicken out, you can place it on that paper towel covered plate. And that way the paper towel will catch the oil that comes off the chicken. But what it also does is it leaves a frying pan behind that still has some of the oil as well as the seasonings. And that oil, that seasoning, and those leftovers, the remnants of chicken, will be what's going to flavor our vegetables. So once you've taken that chicken out without missing a beat, we are adding our vegetables in. So that includes our 1 onion, which should have been chopped at this point in dice, beefsteak tomato, and our garlic. And we are going to saute that in the oil, seasoning, etc. leftoverness that was in the pan to catch all of that flavor. You want those to saute until the vegetables are soft. They don't have to be completely translucent, but you want them soft. You can tell softness by using that wooden spoon or the rubber spatula to be able to just see how dense it is. Or you could do what Robert does, which is to kidnap a piece of onion or something and taste it. It won't hurt you. Vegetables are good for us. So once you've gotten it to a consistency where the onions are soft, not completely translucent or not completely melted, but soft enough that they bend easily with the gentle push of the wooden spoon, at that point, we then add in the tomato paste. Now remember, I said I wasn't going to use the entire can of the tomato paste. What I've learned is that tomato paste is very high in sugar. Tomatoes, of course, are a fruit, so it makes sense. But what it also means is that I like to decrease the amount of sweetness that the meal has and give it a little bit more savory. So instead of using the entire can, I use half of that small can. And if you can't do half, what I've also learned is another neat trick is to use a dinner spoon that you would regularly eat a meal with. And if you can scoop tomato paste out of that twice, 2 scoops of that dinner spoon's sized helping of tomato paste into the pan with the onions, tomatoes, and garlic will be perfectly enough for that pan to have enough sauce or enough flavor from the tomato. So we're going to add that in there. Now remember, tomato paste is a paste, it's thick. So it's going to take a while for that to break down. But the point of doing this is to incorporate the tomato flavor into the onion, garlic, and fresh tomato cooking that we have going on down there. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. So you want to add that in there, and that I usually let saute for another, I would say 6 or 7 minutes. And that's just because you want the tomato paste to completely break down and incorporate with the liquid that's in there already. After that 7 minutes is done, we usually are at the point where we have a soup-like paste that is complete with the onions, etc. Your pan will begin to get a little quiet. That's the way you'll know that your sauce is coming to temperature, because that pan will get quiet. When it begins to get quiet, we then want to add water. And I add water up to about, I would say, right before you get to the edge of the pan. And that's because you don't want it to, of course, overflow, but because that sauce, that water, is going to turn into our sauce for the chicken, and we're going to actually stew our chicken in that sauce. So once you've added the water to right below the rim of the frying pan, you then want to just gently use your wooden spoon to gently stir and incorporate the tomato, garlic, onion, etc. paste that's been cooking into the water. And that's just to make sure that the water soaks in and takes in all of that flavor. You can do this by gently stirring for about 2 minutes or until you feel the water begins to approach boil. And we usually know when a water can approach boil because generally when it's about to boil, the pot or the pan on the stove, I will begin to shake a little bit. Another way is just by being able to use what I call the swirl technique, which is to use the wooden spoon as a guide and touch the rim of one of your sides of your pot and just kind of do a circular motion trailing that entire rim. If you can feel the fumes or the smoke, the heat rising up from the pot at that point, that's when we know that we're reaching that boiling temperature. At that point, we are going to add our chicken pieces back into that stewing pot. And we're going to decrease from medium-high temperature to medium temperature. When we decrease to medium temperature, we will then use a lid to partially cover the chicken. And we let that cook and simmer for 20 minutes. Then we come back and go enjoy a break, get a stretch in, wipe your forehead, because if you're where I am right now, it's probably very hot in the kitchen. And we'll come back and talk about it in a few. And we're back. So, I am sitting in front of a pot that is stewed down some, not completely done, but some. This is where we're going to find out about how well our chicken has cooked. What I usually do is I say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Stick with your tried and true fork done ready procedure. So with meat, generally, we have traditional kind of old school ways of being able to check if our meat is done or if a pie or a cake is finished baking and stuff like that. So, put the toothpick in the center of the cake. If it comes back completely clean, it's done and the cake's ready to come out. Likewise, with chicken and most meat reach a certain temperature before they are considered cooked thoroughly. For us, for the benefit of those who are not using a talking thermometer or talking meat thermometer, we are going to use what we used to call the fork method, which is that generally if you take a fork or a knife and you stick it into the densest part of the chicken, if the densest part cuts through clean with no resistance, it means that the chicken is cooked. And it's because the densest part is always the hardest or the longest to get done. The edges that are thinner will get crispified and cooked or stewed or whatever it needs to get done a lot quicker. So, 2 ways we can do this is, 1, you can be the safety person that I want you all to be, and that is to remove a piece of chicken. Generally, I could use a tong, or you could use a fork if you're like me and just grab one, I don't know. And you can take that to a plate to be able to test your chicken and see if it is the texture you need it to be. And again, you want to make sure that you're sticking that sharp knife or that fork through the thickest part of the chicken. And if it cuts through without any type of resistance, that's when you know your chicken is good enough done. And you want to do this to the biggest piece of chicken in that pot. So make sure that we keep track of which one is the bigger piece. Because if we test a small piece of chicken, then that piece may be done, but that might not be the same for his brothers. All right. So after 20 minutes, generally, we check that to make sure that we have at least halfway prepared chicken. And we'll know that because it should be pretty easy to cut through it. If it is still giving some resistance, we're going to put it back in. Generally, my recipe for this calls for 35 total minutes in cooking on a stove like that. So I would usually tell you that you're not done and you need another 15 minutes. However, depending on how you like your chicken, if you like it falling apart or if you like it to have a little pull to it, that's also something to talk about, because the longer you stew the chicken, the less resistance it'll provide when it's time to actually eat it. So if you stew it for longer than 35 minutes and you go up to 45, you may come back with chicken that very easily breaks apart, which is good too. Depends on how you like it. I usually eat chicken with bones on it, so I'm not used to it falling apart like that, because generally I still want to eat it off the bone. So with this being a boneless chicken recipe, I'm trying to just adjust for you. So put the chicken back in and let's run it for the full 35 minutes. And once that 35 minutes is completely done, we want to pull out that piece of chicken again and we'll test it again. At that point, we are well above the cooking time to begin safely tasting the food to see how it comes along. However, if you feel like you need more time or you feel like it's not there yet before you taste it, definitely, stay safe and do that. The final piece to doing this is to make sure that your sauce or your what we call a sauce turns into a gravy. So we'll be making what I love to trick people with, which is called a slurry. A slurry is the most basic way of thickening any type of sauce into a thicker paste or a gravy, especially when it's on the stove. And it's by combining 2 ingredients: water, flour. So what I usually do is I will take a cup of water. When I say a cup, I do mean a cup, 1 cup. And I add it to an actual drinking cup. And then for every cup of water I put in there, I put in a tablespoon of flour. You want to mix the water and flour. Usually 1 or 2 cups is enough water. And then mix flour in a tablespoon at a time until your water becomes a paste. Not liquefied, not liquid, really thin, a thick paste. Because when it becomes that thick paste, that's the consistency that you want your gravy to be. You want your gravy to be just as thick as that. So make sure you mix the entire drinking glass that you're got the flour and water mixture in, so that there's no flour at the bottom kind of sitting there. So you want to make sure you mix it really good. And once we've got that mixed up and we've got that slurry done, we're going to add that to our simmering pot of chicken. Remember, at this point, chicken is basically done. So at this point, we are adding heat to this slurry, and we're going to make the entire pan become gravified. Gravified. So that's the next step. So we want to add the slurry to the gravy, to the pot. And in doing that, I then suggest to people, if you want to slowly, just gently stir the pot, just to make sure that that slurry gets all over it. What ends up happening is that slurry will break off, and with the hot water cooking it, it will spread. And the thickness that came from your drinking glass is now the gravy that is covering your chicken. So once you do your quick kind of really, really soft stir with your wooden spoon, cover the chicken back up, and let it simmer for about another 8 to 9 minutes. When you come back and periodically check on it, about, I would say, every 3 minutes, keep checking on it. When you come back, you should have your finished product, which would be your delicious Creole chicken. Now, let's talk about this real quick. We have a dish that is perfect to be paired with what I love to call the traditional Sunday dinner, which is usually some sort of rice. We usually do white rice or rice and beans. And that gravy and that chicken poured over that rice is the best thing ever. When I say my favorite dish. Second of all is that it also does great with salad. So if you make this chicken with this sauce, a lot of people may like to make a cold salad, a macaroni salad, a pasta salad, a potato salad, something like that. It's a great pairing with it if you're trying to keep it light. So it can also serve for those who are trying to be a little bit more healthy and not add the carbs. Finally, is that the chicken, if you're using it boneless with the gravy, also could make for a pretty good sandwich. I've had people slap my Creole chicken on bread, and they love it. So by all means, it's a versatile meal. It's a versatile dish, and it's my favorite dish. When I first came here to the U.S., it was something that I remember we ate almost every night, and it was because, it was just something to get used to. It was a staple, but we didn't want to lose our identity coming here. So we kept a lot of our recipes and traditions here. And it's that way still. A lot of the things that I keep with me and my identity, it has shaped my way of thought and the way that I do things, but it also has allowed me to infuse it into spaces that may not have encountered it before. And that includes with the Federation. So when I work with you all, in any way, diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, any NABS events we do, I look forward to being able to learn from you all, and I hope you all learn from me. And I hope that you enjoy this delicious chicken dish. Let me know how it comes out, because if it needs some work or if you have any questions about preparing it, by all means, give me a call. But other than that, my name is Robert Parsons. I am a board member of NABS, so proud to be one, and I'm so happy to be a part of this. Thank you all for keeping me in the loop and allowing me to share some of my chickenology adventures with you. Au revoir, mes amis.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Sheeler. I am currently a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I am doing art. Awesome. So thank you for joining us today. I honestly just wanted you to elaborate a little bit on your cooking journey, especially since you did go through blindness skills training. So my experience going through the Louisiana Center for the Blind in home management was super wonderful and super great. One thing that I kind of look back at now is I used to say that I could cook and that I felt like I was in a really good spot with all of that. And then I look back at it now and it's kind of like, no, I really wasn't. And so it was really awesome that I got the experience to actually learn how to have the good cooking skills to be able to cook moving forward for myself. But yeah, it was, I felt like it was really a good experience in the sense that we got to choose kind of what we were interested in cooking within certain parameters, obviously, but that was pretty open-ended, and they really encouraged us to do stuff that we were going to be able to apply to our lives later on, and nothing was too big or too small, which was really awesome. They were just really open to ideas. I know for me, specifically for my Meal for 8, which is one of the requirements that you have to graduate from the center, I
asked my instructor if I could turn it into kind of an art piece. And my instructor was super on board with that. He asked me to come up with several ideas and then that I could propose to him and bring them back to him. And I did. I had 24 different ideas or something crazy like that. And what we ended up settling on was doing a meal where the food was the environment instead of creating food for the environment, if that makes any sense. For example, I made a pasta dough tablecloth instead of having a tablecloth that was actually an edible tablecloth. I made a quesadilla placemats, oat bar plates, fruit leather napkins, Jolly Rancher silverware, chocolate cups with chocolate milk inside of them, and then popcorn chairs that people were able to actually sit on. And then when they were ready to eat them, just bend down and rip them open and eat the popcorn. So they were just really encouraged me to work all the details of that out. And I think that it turned out pretty successful just because of their help. So
That's literally amazing. And I love that you turned it into an art piece. It just shows that, for our students who like to cook or specifically bake and kind of do more visual decorating, that nothing's off limits. So thank you so much for sharing.
For sure.
Thank you to our special guests for being on this episode. I hope whether you are a novice in the kitchen or someone who has enjoyed cooking for a very long time, you enjoyed this episode and you found some of it helpful, and you'll check back with us for our next episode. Thank you for listening, and if you are interested in getting involved with the NABS Now podcast, please visit nabslink.org for more information.